Suzy Wrong, Joy Drive with Dee and Warren's film, TV and theatre reviewer.
Suzy Wrong, it's good to have you back. How are you going with lockdown?
It's a bit hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
I heard that you guys were having a mock down up there in Sydney, that nobody's really paying attention.
I don't know. I've taken it very seriously. I'm terrified. The numbers are not good.
No.
Are you steering clear of the shops, the essential garment shopping?
I literally have not left my apartment for 8 days.
Well done, Suzy.
Well,
Yeah,
sure.
I'm taking it very seriously.
Good.
Yeah,
Good
well,
to hear.
that is good.
Now, the homework you gave us last week was Feel Good, which is currently streaming 2 seasons on Netflix. Did it make you feel good, Suzy?
I think it did.
Tell us about it.
When we first meet the stand-up comedian May, she's already clocked up well over a year of sobriety, but we soon discover that the addict has never really stopped spiraling out of control. In the Netflix series Feel Good, May begins a relationship with George being the name of another young woman, but unlike May, George is completely new and very freaked out about being lesbian. The incongruity of the union sparks off a series of triggering events that exacerbates the challenges in May's life, and that forms the basis of this dark comedy. In many ways, similar to another show we had talked about last year called Work in Progress, Feel Good is a deeply quirky show about very neurotic queer women. And if you have a taste for unconventional, edgy humor, this is probably going to be one for you to check out. It gave me lots of big belly laughs, and although I don't necessarily identify with any of these characters, its honest depictions of life's chaotic nature found resonance with me. Dee and Warren, are you big drinkers, or is that an inappropriate question?
I used to be. I went sober we've had this discussion, Suze, about a year and a half ago, and now I have an occasional, go. But no, her issue, I think you're making this in reference to Mae Martin's addictions, which weren't just alcohol. But, yes, addiction is a big part of this story.
Yeah, it kind of talks about addiction across the board. She even has a bit of a soliloquy about how she transfers addictions from drugs to, and currently a woman, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, she replaces her cocaine high with the love high, doesn't she, of a relationship?
And with equal disaster, it appears.
Absolutely.
I think it's a really interesting... it's not the first time we've had a drama comedy series based around a comic and it's autobiographical in part, although I think this is largely autobiographical. And I think that Mae Martin, who is a handy comic anyway, and this story is part of her shtick on stage anyway, about, yes, she had addictions, and yes, she moved out of home very young, and yes, her parents were wacky, and yes, she's Canadian. But I found the whole thing, good, but I find the comics lifestyle so meh.
I found it really... I found the first season was a little bit chaotic.
I think that was her life.
For me, and I suppose that was her life, and I was getting frustrated with the relationship. I mean, clearly it wasn't a healthy relationship, but it kept going on. And I suppose we've all done that at some point in our life. But I found the second season, I didn't watch all the second season, but the first few that I did, it seemed to be a little bit more...
focused?
a bit more focused into May's, I guess, trauma and her traumatic past and some of her identity issues. And I quite liked the second season better.
Yeah, I did also. And Suzy, I'll ask you this, and without spoilers, because I imagine if somebody's thinking of seeing the whole thing, you don't want any spoilers. But there is a dramatic thing that happens in May's life, and she's remembering it as a young adult about something that happened to her, which she thought was quite fine when she was 14. She wasn't as conflicted about when she was 14, and goes back to revisit it. I felt like I needed some sort of debriefing after that. I felt like they just sort of finished the season and we had no resolution, and I was like, that's a pretty heavy thing, particularly if somebody has experienced that in their own life, perhaps, that's watching this. I find it all very... Did you find that quite deep and quite confronting for a series that appears to be quite light?
Yeah, I think the lightness of it is quite deceptive, isn't it? Because it really, she kind of really bears all in a way that I enjoy, in that she's not very sort of sanctimonious about it. She kind of doesn't, display her soul and kind of feel like she's above all of that, and she's here to tell the tale after having gone through the worst. She's kind of telling us from a really bad place, which is why there's a lot of that chaos, which I find it resonates true to me. And I feel like even though her circumstances are so far from my life, you know, in a way, I have an identification issue with her place, her time, and her personalities. But I like the way that she talks about chaos and how she's frantically always trying to put things in place, trying to make things right, trying to feel good. And I think that's what all of us do, you know, in our own different ways, whether we focus on careers or love interest or anything. We're trying to find order in chaos, and I think that way, that part of it, I thought is depicted really well.
I thought she was being honest about her experience. That came across really clear in it, and you know, you're right. You could see how confusing it is, but I also liked that the show. You know what it did really well? It showed the humanity of the characters. And it showed how vulnerable they are and how susceptible they are to trauma in parts of their life and how it manifests in their relationships. I thought that was really well done.
But more importantly, how cute Charlotte Ritchie is as George.
You know who I liked? Lisa. Is it Lisa Kudrow?
Lisa Kudrow plays the mother.
Oh my goodness,
she's
from
that.
Friends. She was good. Can I say one joke that she said that I really loved, and that was talking about you know, her May and not being ready, and she spoke about how she says, "Why else would my body have expelled you 4 weeks premature? You were sapping my resources." I was laughing my head off at that. Poor May.
The parents,
the parents.
The parents are both great characters. I
It was
love them.
You've always been needy, she was trying to say, and I thought that was hilarious.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
that
Lisa Kudrow's performance is so great. Like the things
really
she
good.
says are so horrible, but she performs it as though it's just like any normal mother, which I guess for many of us, we do experience our parents that way.
Yeah.
You know, we hear them say things that affect us so deeply in such horrible ways, but it's almost like part of their normal lives.
And you could see they did care for her. It's just it was in a weird way.
Yeah, and they're sort of saying, well, we've put up with all your shit, and if you're going to come back, this is how it's. If you're going to be in our lives, it's going to be like this. Can I also just call out that can I just say first that we are speaking with Suzy Wrong, who's a film, theatre, TV correspondent from Sydney town in lockdown.
Do you like that, correspondent?
And we're talking about May Martin's production of Feel Good. It runs to 2 series available on Netflix, streaming in Australia now. May Martin is a comic. I'm not sure if May Martin identifies as she, her at all. I know that she identifies
the first season
as they.
was all she, and then in the second season there became like an ambiguity.
Yeah.
It could be someone going through, a sort of a reflective period about their gender, which seems to be happening a lot at the moment.
I think that May says the end, and that's why I presented it as she, because I know that if you haven't seen season 1, that is kind of a reveal that they go through the identity of deciding. Well, I think May actually says, "I think I'm transgender or non-binary or whatever the kids are calling it these days," which is kind of also not right or appropriate, but it's interesting that they say it.
May also did a tour called Dope, where I think she spoke about love and addiction, and I believe that this was based on that tour to some extent. But doesn't it show that, you know, we can often, what happens when we potentially jump into relationships without thinking whether we're suitable for each other or why we actually want one, whether we're doing it to mask other addictions?
That's one of the themes, isn't it? Is that being drawn to romance, and because I'm completely not that person. I look at people who are so into romance, and I always feel like, oh, where does logic place in all this? And it sort of doesn't play into it. And it's almost the point of it. You know, like if logic comes into it, then there's no romance. So they go about it not thinking about it. And I admire people who can do that because I can't.
But how good is it that this show is on Netflix for everyone to see? It's not in some cinema out in the suburbs.
You don't have to wait for queer film.
Thing.
Yeah,
it is on mainstream Netflix for everyone to see. It's dealing with addiction and relationships and trauma and identity problems. I thought it was great that it's available.
Yeah, and I like the fact, and I love the fact, Suzy Wrong, that you bring us these shows and programs and documentaries that do include people from our community. But I like the fact in this one, and we're talking Feel Good, which is on Netflix by May Martin, that it's not the sexuality is not the biggest issue here. Like her gender is an issue, her addiction, her relationship to parents, her not being from the place that she's living. There's so much in it. I think May Martin is a talent. I find it problematic in that it's focused on the life of a comic, because I find that shtick done Jerry Seinfeld did it.
Suzy, what's our homework for next week? Before you give it to us, Dee was going to suggest a sporting show, so we're not going to do that one. What is
I've already asked.
No one's interested in sport.
Well, it's Formula One. It's hardly sport.
What are we watching, Suzy?
Well, next week we're doing The Legend of the Underground, which is a new documentary on Binge that deals with the rampant discrimination and persecution of gay men in Nigeria today.
Oh wow.
Okay, that's good. So that's a one. Is it just one episode?
It's a feature length, like 100-minute documentary.
So it's on Binge. It's called The Legend of the Underground.
That's right.
I like it.
Suzy Wrong, stay safe up there.
Thank you, and I'll see you next Tuesday.
Aww.
See you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday, mate.